you'd arrived in Ramsbottom today, you'd be forgiven for thinking this was just another busy railway station. But appearances can be deceptive, because this railway closed to passengers more than 50 years ago. So, what's the story here? Before we can understand the story of its railway, we first need to understand the town itself. Ramsbottom lies around 12 miles northwest of Manchester, tucked away in the valley of the River Irwell and surrounded by the rolling hills of the West Pennine Moors. Around 17,000 people call this town home, although its history stretches back much further. One thing you can't miss around here is that tower. Watching over the town from Holcombe Hill is one of its most recognisable landmarks, the Peel Monument. Built in the memory of Sir Robert Peel, the 19th century Prime Minister and the man widely regarded as the founder of the modern British police force. Down in the valley, the River Irwell helped turn what had been once a small rural settlement into a busy industrial town. Cotton mills, paper mills and all sorts of other industries began appearing along the valley floor. Even today, that Victorian legacy is hard to miss. The former mill buildings still stand amongst the town streets, while rows of stone-built terrace reflect a period when Ramsbottom expanded rapidly to support its growing industries. Like many towns across Britain, Ramsbottom has its own unique traditions, and Ramsbottom certainly has a few. Every Good Friday, people make the climb up Holcombe Hill, with the long-standing tradition of egg rolling taking place before the ascent. But if climbing hills and rolling eggs wasn't unusual enough, Ramsbottom also hosts the World Black Pudding Throwing Championships. Apparently the aim is to knock Yorkshire puddings off their plinths using black puddings. I don't know who first came up with that idea, but it's now a world championship. As a Yorkshireman, I can't decide whether to be offended or hungry.
This must be the marketplace. A tilted vase.
By the middle of the 19th century, Ramsbottom was booming. The mills were busy, the town was growing, and more goods than ever were being made here. There was just one problem, and everything still had to come in and back out again by horse and cart. Cotton, coal, paper, and sooner or later that simply wasn't going to keep up. If Ramsbottom was going to keep growing, something had to change. Unfortunately, it was about to. And that change finally arrived in 1846. When the East Lancashire Railway reached Ramsbottom. Suddenly places like Manchester and Bury were much easier to reach, and the town was no longer relying on horse and cart alone. The railway opened up new opportunities, and as it grew, so did Ramsbottom. At the centre of it all was Ramsbottom Station. And this is where the story really comes to life. The original station had two platforms, separated by a level crossing. And more than 175 years later, that crossing is still opening and closing, though I'd imagine the gates have changed. The main station building stood on the northbound platform, pretty much where today's building stands. And as more people and more freight started to use the railway, Ramsbottom didn't stay like this for long. By the 1890s, the station had grown and more buildings appeared on the opposite platform, and passengers could cross the line using a covered footbridge, and canopies helped keep at least some of Lancashire's weather at bay. Of course, it wasn't just people using the railway. A large goods shed stood alongside the station. Sidings filled with wagons came and went, and there was even a railway connection to the nearby Square Works bleaching factory. It just shows how closely the railway and the town had become linked. This wasn't simply somewhere to catch a train, it was part of the engine that kept Ramsbottom running. It's easy to look up the line today and think this was just another country station, but just beyond here was Stubbins Junction, where the railway split in two. One line headed towards Rawtenstall and Bacup, while the other headed for Accrington. For somewhere the size of Ramsbottom, that made this a surprisingly important piece of railway. Today it's peaceful, but 100 years ago this would have been a very different scene. Like so many railways across Britain, changing times eventually caught up with Ramsbottom. The line survived the worst of the beaching cuts, but it didn't get away completely. Much of the railway was scaled back, the station lost a platform and the line was reduced to single track, and many of the Victorian station buildings disappeared. Passenger services finally came to an end in 1972. Freight trains survived for a few more years, serving the coal depot at Rawtenstall until 1980. And for a while, it looked as though Ramsbottom had lost its railway forever. But here's the thing, Ramsbottom's railway story wasn't over. Even before the last freight trains had disappeared, a group of volunteers had already decided they weren't going to let this railway vanish. Calling themselves the East Lancashire Railway Preservation Society, they set about bringing trains back to the Irwell Valley. After years of hard work, it finally paid off. In 1987, passenger trains returned to Ramsbottom for the first time in 15 years as the new Heritage Railway reopened between Bury and the town. For the first few years, Ramsbottom was the end of the line. Then in 1991, trains reached Rawtenstall once again, bringing even more of the old railway back to life. What's really impressive is just how much of this station has actually been rebuilt. I honestly hadn't realised quite how much of what you're looking at today is a reconstruction. If you didn't know the history, you'd probably assumed that it never closed at all. The station building was rebuilt in the style of the original, and the southbound platform returned, and today it feels every bit like a proper working station again. And today thousands of people visit each year. Some come for the trains, some come for the town and the fish and chips. And looking around, it's hard to believe that there was ever a time people thought all of this might disappear. This isn't actually my first visit here. The last time I came was probably around 1990, when I was about 10 years old. We'd caught one of the old electric trains from Manchester, Victoria to Bury. And this railway hadn't been open all that long. And if my memory's right, Ramsbottom was still the end of the line back then.
All I remember is the weather was horrific. And they had an open fire in the station building. And I think we spent the majority of our visit trying to dry the clothes.
Most of that day is a bit of a blur now, although for some reason I can still remember enormous stone slabs on the platform. It's funny the things that stick in your mind, isn't it? And coming back more than 35 years later, it's amazing just to see how far this railway has come. When I first arrived in Ramsbottom, it did feel a bit odd calling it a lost railway town. After all, there are still trains here, people still fill the platforms, and the railway is still a huge part of the town. But I think that's exactly what makes Ramsbottom such an interesting place. This isn't really the story of a railway that was lost. It's the story of a railway that people refuse to lose. And more than 50 years after British Rail walked away, the East Lancashire Railway is still bringing people here, and I think that's a pretty fitting legacy. I'd love to know your memories of Ramsbottom, or maybe your favourite station on the East Lancashire Railway. Let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this episode, there are loads more places to discover in this Lost Railway Town series. If you'd like to support this channel, I've also got a limited edition range of Lost Railway Town mugs. And finally, a huge thank you to all my channel members and everyone who supports the channel. It really does mean a lot. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, give the video a like and leave a comment below. It really does help the channel. So until next time, I'll see you in another Lost Railway Town. Ta-ra!